In this chapter, we will explore the fascinating step-by-step journey of how raw text is transformed into a continuous mathematical format that large language models can actually understand. We hear a lot about how massive these models are, right? But before a neural network can learn anything at all, we have to prepare the data. The way we feed text into a model literally makes all the difference. Let's dive in. For this explainer, here is our agenda. First, the need for embeddings. Second, splitting text into tokens. Third, byte pair encoding explained. Fourth, sampling with sliding windows. Fifth, adding positional information. And finally, a summary with our key takeaways. Section 1. The need for embeddings, bridging the gap between text and math. Think about it for a second. Deep neural networks operate entirely on continuous mathematical operations, but human language? Well, text is inherently categorical and discrete. So we really have to ask ourselves how a model can possibly process a book or an article. I mean, you can't just multiply the word apple by a weight matrix. It just doesn't compute. We have to map these discrete words into a format that a deep learning architecture can actually digest. The elegant solution to this is creating word embeddings. Think of an embedding as a translation layer. It converts non-numeric, categorical text data into continuous numerical vectors. By projecting words into a continuous vector space, the neural network can finally compute relationships between them. In this mathematical space, words with similar semantic meanings will organically end up clustered closer to each other. Moving on to Section 2, splitting text into tokens, building a foundational vocabulary. You can think of this data preparation pipeline as 3 distinct logical phases. First, we take our raw text. For instance, our source material uses Edith Wharton's short story, The Verdict, as a great sample data set. We take that text and break it into discrete chunks called tokens. Second, we map those tokens to unique integer IDs. And finally, in step 3, we convert those IDs into the dense mathematical embeddings we just talked about. Now, the core idea of building a vocabulary is actually quite straightforward. By extracting all the unique words from our training text and sorting them alphabetically, we essentially build a giant dictionary. This vocabulary maps every specific word, and even punctuation marks, to a unique integer, which we call a token ID. So in our dictionary, a word like brown might become 0, dog becomes 1, fox becomes 2, and so on. But, here is where we hit a bit of a roadblock. What happens when a word simply isn't in our dictionary? If our basic tokenizer suddenly encounters a brand new word, like hello, that was never present in the training text, a simple vocabulary lookup is going to fail entirely. In Python, it literally throws a key error, and the model just stops in its tracks. Which brings us to Section 3. Byte pair encoding explained, the elegant solution to unknown words. Unlike a basic tokenizer that just gives up and replaces completely new words with a generic unknown marker, which you'll often see written as an UNC token, modern models use byte pair encoding, or BPE, to solve this gracefully. BPE handles unseen words by breaking them down into recognizable subword units, or if necessary, stripping them all the way down to individual letters. Here is the intuition behind how BPE works under the hood. It efficiently builds its vocabulary from the ground up. It starts by adding all single characters to its dictionary. Then, it iteratively merges the most frequent character pairs into subwords. For example, if D and E frequently appear together, they merge into the subword D. It keeps merging these frequent combinations until it reaches a target vocabulary size. This brilliant approach guarantees that the tokenizer can parse absolutely any text it encounters out in the wild, even completely made-up words. And BPE doesn't just handle standard text, it also seamlessly incorporates special context tokens. For instance, the tokenizer used for models like GPT-2 and GPT-3 has a vocabulary size of exactly 50,257. It assigns the extremely large ID of 50,256 to a special end-of-text token. This token is absolutely crucial because it acts as a boundary marker between completely unrelated documents. It essentially tells the model, hey, this Wikipedia article is finished, and the next thing you'll read is a completely different context, ensuring the model doesn't artificially connect unrelated ideas. Section 4. Sampling with sliding windows, structuring the next word prediction task. Okay, so we have our integer IDs, but we need to structure an actual learning task. The crucial point here is understanding what large language models are actually trying to do. They are heavily pre-trained on a core task called next word prediction. The model receives a sequence of input words and learns to predict the immediate next word. To generate the training data for this, we use a sliding window approach over our tokenized sequence to create thousands of input target pairs. We package these token IDs into PyTorch tensors, which, if you're not familiar, are simply multidimensional mathematical arrays. The target sequence, let's call it Y, that the model needs to predict is exactly the input sequence X, just shifted one position to the right. For example, if the input context is AND, the target to predict is established. If the sliding window expands the context to AND established, the new target is himself. We just keep sliding this window across the text, creating all these microtasks. When we implement this in practice, we use a vital hyperparameter called the stride. The stride dictates exactly how far our sliding window shifts across the document to grab the next batch of text. A stride of 1 shifts the reading window by just one single word, which creates highly overlapping training batches. On the other hand, if your context size is 4, a stride of 4 shifts the window by that full context size, preventing any batch overlap whatsoever. It's a delicate balance. Overlapping gives you more training pairs, but non-overlapping prevents the model from overfitting on redundant data. Section 5. Adding positional information, solving the sequence order problem. Let's look at the sheer scale of the dimensions here. We initialize an embedding layer with small random weights to convert those discrete token IDs into dense continuous vectors. In massive, state-of-the-art models like GPT-3, these embeddings can be up to 12,288 dimensions long. That massive dimensional space is exactly what gives the model the capacity to capture incredibly deep semantic meaning. But there is a major catch. Because the embedding layer acts as a simple, static lookup table, a word like fox gets the exact same 12,288 dimensional vector representation no matter where it appears. Whether it's the first word in a sentence, the middle word, or the absolute last word, the vector is identical. The vocabulary embedding is completely position agnostic. So how does the model know its structural place? To fix this critical limitation, models like OpenAI's GPT introduce absolute positional embeddings. These are entirely separate vectors from the token embeddings we just discussed. Their one and only purpose is to capture and convey the physical, absolute location of a token within the input sequence. The solution is surprisingly elegant. It literally comes down to simple vector addition. First, we extract the token embedding, which gives us the semantic, dictionary meaning of the word. Second, we extract the positional embedding, which gives us the exact structural location of the word. Finally, we seamlessly add those two vectors together. By doing this, we provide the neural network with a final combined input that contains both the rich meaning of the word and its exact place in the text.
Section 6. Summary and Key Takeaways. Reviewing the complete data pipeline.
Let's summarize the key takeaways we've covered in this explainer. First, neural nets require continuous vectors, not discrete categorical text. Second, tokenization is the foundational process of splitting text into manageable integer IDs. Third, byte pair encoding elegantly handles completely unknown words by breaking them down into known subwords. Fourth, we sample our data using a sliding window tensor to create thousands of next word prediction tasks. And finally, we construct our ultimate model inputs by mathematically adding token meaning and positional sequence order together into one cohesive vector. Now that our data is a beautifully structured matrix of continuous numbers, the ultimate question remains, how will the neural network actually learn to read, prioritize, and generate text from this mathematical format? Well, that is where the magic of the model's architecture comes into play, and it's a fascinating journey for another explainer. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll catch you next time.